If you don't have access to medication, focusing with ADHD can be a nightmare. But in this video, we're gonna go over some awesome tips that can help you focus a lot better. Keep in mind though, everyone's ADHD is different, so if any of these tips don't work for you or you do other stuff to help you focus, comment it down below. The more people's perspectives we can get, the better. So let's hit that 2x speed button and dive right into this. The first tip that you wanna keep in mind is to increase stimulation. For neurotypical people, whenever they can't focus, they have to reduce stimulation, right? They have to kind of drown out stuff, go to a quiet place, so on and so forth. But for people with ADHD, the opposite is true. Oftentimes we can't focus because there isn't enough stimulation. So how do you add stimulation? Use the 5 senses. For example, let's start with smell, right? If you want to increase stimulation through smell, you can put on a scented candle that you really like, a diffuser, something like that. If you want to increase stimulation through taste, what you can do is you can have like a really nice snack that you like, or having a beverage. I find like, having diet soda or something like that really helps me focus more. Coffee as well is a great kind of taste thing to have if you like it. For hearing, you can put a podcast on that you really like in the background. You can add music and stuff like that. I personally have specific playlists that I'll listen to whenever I'm trying to increase my focus. Mac Miller has been my go-to lately. For increasing visual stimulation, right, what I like to do is have these visualizers on in the background, and that kind of helps me focus too. Fidget toys as well are a huge thing that really help. For example, I have one of these good old fidget spinners on my desk. I'll play with this a lot whenever I'm trying to focus on like a meeting or something like that, or if I'm doing a really boring task and need to increase stimulation. But with senses, it can be other stuff too. If you have a really comfy blanket that you like, that can always help. If you have comfy clothes that you really like, change into those. That'll help increase stimulation in a positive way. The reason that a lot of these things work is because, normally whenever we're searching for stimulation, what we'll do is we'll go to kind of negative things that distract us from what we're doing. So we might go down like a Google rabbit hole of some random stuff that we don't really need to know about. We might end up going to go get something and then forgetting completely what we're doing. But when you have stuff in your environment that is already going to increase stimulation, this can help a lot with not getting too distracted. For example, I might be working, I might get a little bored, and then I'll kind of look over to the visualization I have going on, and that'll kind of, capture my attention for a little bit. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then I'll kind of go back and start focusing on whatever I was doing. Or like a fidget spinner too, I can just pick that up, start using it. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Now I have enough stimulation and now I can focus a little better. With this tip too, if you want to kind of boost it, what you want to do is you want to add stimulation as you lose focus. So typically I'll start kind of with no music, nothing going on, anything like that. And I'll just be kind of sitting doing work. And then as I feel myself start to lose focus, I'll add in music and kind of bump myself back into that groove. Then once music no longer does it, I'll add in like a fidget spinner or something like that. Then I'll add in the candle. Then I'll add in the drink, so on and so forth. Doing this can help you sustain your focus over a much longer period of time. Tip number 2 is the Pomodoro method. This method is awesome for people with ADHD because it works so well to our strengths. The way it works is super simple. You go 25 minutes on and then take a 5-minute break. You do this 3 times, and then on the 4th time, you do a 25-minute focus session and a 15 to 20-minute break. It's super easy to remember, super straightforward. I'm gonna link a Pomodoro timer down in the description below that you can check out. That's free, that I use all the time. But the reason that this works so well is A, it makes it easier for us to get started on a task because, if we want to focus on something for hours on end, that's really overwhelming and that's something we don't want to do. But focusing for 25 minutes on a task, that's not too bad. And we get breaks in between. The second reason it really helps is, when we're kind of focused for 25 minutes, we can only really focus on one small kind of simple task, right? We can't do something too complicated or too big. The 5-minute breaks also give us an opportunity to kind of get up, pace the room, do other stuff to kind of increase our stimulation in between focus sessions. The next tip is to forget perfectionism. Perfectionism is something that keeps us really trapped a lot of the times and can make it hard to focus. When you have a disorder that makes it hard to pay attention to details, perfectionism is obviously going to make work really frustrating and make it really hard for you to focus. I find that the best thing that helps me focus is just to tell myself I'm going to do a bad job at whatever task I have going on. I'll on purpose go in with the mindset of let me just do a bad job at this, just kind of half-ass it, just see what happens. And when I do that, it gives me permission to mess up, to be more creative, and oftentimes I get better solutions. ADHD brains are super creative. Giving them unlimited freedom to do whatever you want and not be afraid of mistakes actually helps us get more innovative, awesome solutions. Take advantage of the way your brain works and give yourself permission to mess up. Tip number 4 is to body double. Body doubling is a really simple concept. Basically, you just have someone else doing work with you while you are doing work. This can be a friend, a family member, so on and so forth, just as long as they're not going to distract you. The added pressure of having someone else there doing work can help a lot. If you don't have access to something like that, there are other things you can do too. Like go to a place where other people are working, like coffee shops, libraries, so on and so forth. There's also like study with me's on YouTube, right? You can use those as well to kind of act as a person who is working alongside you. That can be a huge boost to your focus. Tip number 5 is to increase novelty. The ADHD brain thrives on new, interesting experiences. So adding something new, adding a little twist to whatever task it is you're doing can make it a lot more easy to focus. The simplest way to do this is to just go to a new location that you've never been to before to do work. I find that if you have 5 to 6 different places where you can go and study, rotating between those can kind of help keep them fresh and exciting. The other big thing too is, you can use stuff like music and stuff like that in order to keep things more fresh and new. I like to kind of switch up whatever artist I'm listening to, and if it's an artist I'm really into that'll really help me kind of each time be excited to do work because I get to listen to their music. Doing simple things too, like switching up kind of your browser's theme, or maybe having a new theme on your computer that you do all your work on, switching the theme of like your Word document editor or something like that. For programming, I know with my IDE, I will constantly switch whatever theme I'm using, and that just for some reason gets me super excited to code. Tip number 6 is to make it interesting. If you have ADHD, you know that if you're interested in something, you will become obsessed with it and have no problem focusing on it. So always try and tie everything you do back to stuff that's personally interesting to you. For example, in school, I would constantly write essays on like music artists and stuff like that, or on like mental health, or even on video games. And it made it so easy for me to stay locked in and focused. Make sure that anywhere that you can, add in stuff that's interesting to you. And if you're doing something that isn't interesting at all, right? Like for example, in my job, it's not something that's a personal interest to me. What I do is I focus on the stuff and the aspects of it that I find interesting. So for example, I'm really interested in finances and money and stuff like that. So whenever I'm doing a project, I kind of try to frame it in that way at work of like, okay, how can we make the most money or save the most money? And that gets me super excited and a lot more involved because I'm like, oh cool, this is stuff that I'm really interested in. Tip number 7 is to start small. Oftentimes when we have a really big, boring task to get started on, like doing taxes, the reason we don't want to get started on it is because it's so big and overwhelming. A way that I found that helps me kind of get into the groove of focusing is just to do really small little steps towards making progress. And especially beginning the task is the most important part. So to begin it, often start with something like, I'm just gonna focus on this for 5 minutes. For example, with doing your taxes, one of the biggest things you can do is, okay, I'm just gonna look up what softwares can I use to do my taxes. That simple act alone can make it a lot less intimidating to get started, and you'll find that it's way easier to keep going once you do begin. Start small. Think of the smallest possible thing you can do to make progress on a thing, and then just do that. Tip number 8 is to increase challenge and pressure. So ADHD brains love a challenging task, but oftentimes we have really kind of tedious, boring things that we need to do over and over again. And that makes it really hard to focus because if something's not stimulating enough, we're not gonna do it. So in order to increase stimulation and make it easier for you to focus, add challenge and pressure. With challenge, a super simple thing that you can do is like time-bound challenges. So if you have an assignment that's really long and it's really boring, be like, I'm gonna try and get this done in an hour. Let's see if I can just knock this out as quick as possible. Doing something like that makes it a lot more engaging because it's like, oh, okay, shoot, like I have to really focus, and it makes the test way more stimulating. Also, increasing pressure can actually be things like procrastinating. Procrastinating is mostly bad when we're doing it unintentionally. But if we're intentionally waiting until the last minute to do something and we know we're gonna wait until the last minute to do it, it's a lot better. So to give you an example of this, right? If I have a test that's in 2 weeks, I know I'm not gonna retain any of the material until 2 days before the exam. So I will wait until 2 days before the exam, but I will plan to devote those 2 days to studying and nothing else. And having that plan in mind of like, okay, when I get to this point, I will study really hard, and having nothing else planned for those days can be super helpful. Procrastinating becomes a problem when we don't plan to do it and we push off work that we should be doing. But if we already plan to procrastinate, it's fine. And now, if none of these tips work and you just cannot focus for the life of you, the best thing sometimes to do is to take a break. Oftentimes, a lot of us with ADHD constantly have to put in so much mental effort into doing things 24/7. It is exhausting, and no one around us understands how exhausting it is. So the best thing to do sometimes is just to let yourself do whatever you want. Let your brain off the hook, let it watch whatever TV it wants, let it eat whatever food it wants for a contained period of time. I found that if I just binge South Park for like 4 hours sometimes, the next day I'll feel refreshed and ready to go, and I'll be really happy and excited to do work again. Letting our brains have fun and recharge and rest is important. Denying them those things might work for people who are neurotypical, but for people with ADHD, they have to push way harder in order to not do these things. So sometimes letting our brain off the hook, giving it a little treat, can help us stay motivated and accomplish more in the long run. So I hope these tips help. Thank you so much for watching. And again, comment down below any tips that you have for other people. You might help another person out who's going through the comments trying to figure out how they can manage their ADHD better. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.